The Thabo Mbeki Foundation has released a remembrance note on the death of Thomas Madikwe Manthata, saying it marks the end of an era among South Africans who dedicated their lives to the struggle for liberation and the restoration of the dignity and humanity of Black people of South Africa. We're joined now via Skype by Professor Barney Pityana, who worked with Ntate Tom. Professor Pityana, a very good morning to you. Quite a somber morning. I know we're talking about Ntate Manthata, but we wake up this morning to the news of the passing of Zindzi Mandela. How did you receive this news?
Desiree, good morning, and good morning to your listeners. Oh dear, that was just an amazing shock this morning to get the news of Zindzi had passed away. You know, Zindzi represents a younger generation, amazingly a young person who really grew up with a mother in very difficult circumstances, without her father, who was in prison, formed and shaped by those experiences. And yet she's a forthright and feisty woman. Through all of those situations. In many respects, she takes after her iconic mother, Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. My condolences go to her family and the extended Mandela family at this time. It's a very difficult moment for them. It's a very difficult moment for this country. I think it's a difficult moment for the diplomatic corps of our country, of which she was a member.
You're talking about her feistiness, and this she displayed until the end. Towards her last days, there was a lot of back and forth about the displeasure within the African National Congress, about her vocalness, about her displeasure at how both the African National Congress and the government were not remembering her mother properly. Was she right in this quest to make sure that her mother is remembered the way her children wanted her to be remembered?
Let me just say, Desiree, what I remember most fondly is the expression by the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation in the letter that she wrote to Ambassador Mandela. And she says that you are a diplomat. You better live it. You better become a diplomat. I suspect that was asking too much. And so true with the ANC. Zindzi Mandela is Zindzi Mandela. She is Winnie Mandela's daughter, period.
You're not going to tell her what to do.
They should know what to expect, and basically either live with it, and she is not going to become a conformist. I mean, she is Winnie Mandela's daughter, after all.
We move from the passing of one person who needs no introduction. You say Zindzi Mandela and everybody knows who she is. But then here's another unsung hero, Tom Manthata, who has passed away and is one of those people who, if nobody takes on the responsibility of informing the public about who he is, might just be, his memory might just be left in the dustbins of South Africa's history.
Thank you very much. I and many other people appreciate that, especially those of us who were with Tom through the difficult days of the 70s and to date. Of course, it's understandable because when Tom retired from the South African Human Rights Commission after 2 terms, his health really was very indifferent. And in no time, he lost his eyesight. And so he was not in the public eye. So to some degree, I quite understand. But actually, Tom's life and contribution goes way back beyond that. Before that, way back 1967, 1968, when he was a teacher at Sekanantwana School in Soweto. And many of the new younger generation of activists in Soweto were nurtured by him. Many of them went through him as a teacher. But at that time, he was, I think, as the Thabo Mbeki Foundation tribute says, which I read, he was a bridge builder, a reconciler, a person who really spent his life building bridges and growing people and growing communities and developing communities. And yet, he was a very principled person, a very strong, radical-minded about what should happen to this country. And so, yes, we are very indebted to Tom Manthata for the life that he lived and he offered. And I worked with him the last time as when I was chairperson of the Human Rights Commission. He became a member of the commission when I was chairperson. And he was just an amazing colleague. And he drove in particular, the project on the rights of the elderly persons in our country, including the legislation that protected the rights of the elderly. But he also was, till the end of his life, an educator. He was a teacher. And he is soft-spoken at the best of times, with an amazing chuckle here and there. But a very easy person, great organizer, very, very active. And indeed, he was also among the Delmas treason trialists in 1985, 1989. And eventually, after being sentenced to 10 years imprisonment with others, eventually they were acquitted. And by that time, he had spent 4 years in prison. And so Tom has a lot to offer to this country. His memory is indelible, his courage, his commitment, his love of the people and for this country cannot be second-guessed.
Let's talk about legacy. He is said to, one, have been a product of the church, something I'd like to talk to you about as well, because that's the route you have gone as well. But legacy in terms of his love for, or his quest for justice. South Africa came into democracy in 1994. What are your thoughts about justice and how this country has grown in this area up to this juncture?
You know, many of us, like Tom, made a real commitment about justice, but we had actually hung that quest for justice in a commitment to liberation of our people and the people of South Africa. We believed, and we truly do believe, that with the constitutional democratic state we are, the quest for justice finds materiality and affirmation. And so we really do believe that the new South Africa is a great achievement for that which many of us struggled for. And I know Tom Manthata, more than many of us, spent days and nights in the length and breadth of this country. There's hardly a part of this country that Tom Manthata wasn't going out to try and find people who were victimized by apartheid, whether it's forced removals, whether it's people from prison, whether it's people who are banned and their families. Tom Manthata will be the first one to get there to see what their needs were and offer the support of the church. So justice was at the heart of what we were doing. Yes, it is true. One of the things, of course, that COVID-19 and the lockdowns have shown is that how brittle that practice of justice is in the new South Africa. I think we see it in the fact that people are not able to get health care that they need. The facilities are not enough, are not available, are not adequate. We see it when large numbers of people are without food and they scramble at the sight of a car that is stopping to provide food parcels. We see it in many of our people, as is the case this weekend in Cape Town, whose shacks are unlivable, inhabitable anymore because of the rain and the weather conditions that they live in. We see it in the extent to which policing and safety in our communities cannot be relied upon. Yes, justice is an imperative in our time today, according to our Constitution. So the struggle for justice is not at an end. I think Tom Manthata would be the first one to say that. And the only advantage is that that struggle for justice today is driven by and supported by the Constitution. And that's what gives force to that struggle for justice, which in a sense was what many of us lived for.
That side of him that's about the church, you were talking earlier about what we're witnessing with the lockdown and the COVID-19 outbreak. Yesterday, the president, once again, President Cyril Ramaphosa, bringing back the ban on alcohol sales and distribution. And one of the stances he took was that he was against liquor and how it affects black people, sexual freedoms. Tell us about this side of him, where he was encouraging black people to live a pure life.
Well, Tom, in many respects, was no Puritan. But Tom was a person of integrity. You remember during the 1976, the struggles against our people, the Black Christmas, for example, against our people spending all their time and their meager resources on alcohol. The closure of shebeens, the closure of beer hall, which were encouraged by the apartheid system. There is a problem which Tom historically stood with the people against. This commitment to the nefarious activities of alcohol and the consequences thereof, to be out there to discourage people from the negative consequences of what it actually does to our people. I think he did this throughout the 1976 and beyond. He did this during the 1980s, during the hardest possible times in our country, where the army and the police were patrolling the townships and killing young people everywhere. At the heart of it was to say, one of the things that we just cannot afford is to be engaged in those activities that actually undermine our humanity. So yes, he stood against the problems of alcohol. The president is quite right and must be applauded in drawing attention of this nation to the ill discipline that alcohol produces in our people and in our nation. But I want to say the second thing that I think the president raised, not so much last night than in his first statement. He said that one of the things that we must realize with COVID is that the economic system and the economic arrangements in this country have to change for the better, have to change in a manner that makes sure that the inequalities that have become dramatized since 1994 are a thing of the past. We need a new dawn, a new reality about our economic systems, and that we need to deal with the chasm of inequality that really bothers the conscience of our nation to the extent that it does today. And Tom would have been the first one to say that inequality in this country is a scandal. And if the president then says and promises the nation that something will be done to deal with the problem of inequality in our country, we need to applaud that to high heaven. Inequality is not justifiable. Inequality is not justice. What we are experiencing today with COVID-19 and elsewhere are the consequences of a society that is drenched in the blood of inequality. We've got to bring that to an end. So many of us are waiting patiently for the policies that are going to bring us to a very different system of our economic management, that we can no longer live with an unemployment of 30% or more, with more than 50% of our young people under 30 being out of employment, with many of our people dropping out of school. We can never live with that with a clear conscience. And that has to change. I believe that the president promises change, and the president must be applauded for putting this matter in the front line of what this nation's agenda should be about going forward.
In talking about his genesis as a seminarian in the Roman Catholic Church, you're a senior leader in the Anglican Church. The conversation these days is about the role of church in finding solutions for a changing society. What role do you see the church playing as we as South Africans tackle the fight against COVID-19?
It's a very, very important role. Of course, Desiree, as you know, the church does have a lot to answer for. It is true that the church also has to learn a lot from this environment and this situation where we are today. But in South Africa, the church has been important in its journeying with the people of this country through thick and thin, through times good and through times that have been bad. And that process has to continue. I mean, today, especially with the pandemic that we have been going through, it's got to be the church that really brings cohesion and social cohesion and care for people back into the center of life once again. It's got to be the church, I think, that brings to people that just care and for their human dignity once again. It's got to be the church that actually what it has always done, that works with the people for their own self-development, so that the ravages of poverty and inequality can be addressed by the people themselves. And so we really do believe that the church is a very essential agency for change and for development and for peace and for justice in our communities.
Professor
It is a
Pityana,
church that has to talk to the people about gender-based violence, about the children of South Africa and how they deserve to grow in a situation of peace and justice.
we thank you very much for talking to us this morning, but before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a multi-pronged question because we don't always have the chance to speak to you. What are your thoughts about South African society and the different things that are happening at the moment, our fight against this global pandemic, the perceived factions within the African National Congress, the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo's commission on state capture and corruption, the scourge of corruption? What are your thoughts about all these South African societal issues? And you don't necessarily have to only focus on the ones I asked you about. If there are any ones that spring up in your mind that you feel are important to be addressed at this time.
I would say, if I may claim to be an elder in the social and political life of this country, I would say to the leadership of the African National Congress that the sooner they wake up to the reality that they are on notice as a leading political formation of our country as a government, the sooner they wake up to that, the better. That the African National Congress cannot continue to take the goodwill and the commitment of the people of this country for granted. It can't do that for much longer. The African National Congress and its leadership needs to realize that they are on notice that sooner or later it's going to be unable to continue to take us, the people, for granted. And that means, if I may be blunt, it means actually that we need a different forms and types of formation in our country. We need a different sensitivity to justice, to equality, to policies that change. Not only policies that enrich some and impoverish others. We need new sets of policies in our country. Yes, we need to deal urgently with the problem of corruption. And frankly, I despair that the ANC, as currently constituted, will ever be able to rid itself of corruption, because corruption is deeply embedded in the DNA of the ANC. And until actually the ANC wakes up to the fact that it has to change, and it has to change fundamentally, can no longer continue to trot out the same old slogan and promises that never actually get realized. Something has to change. But the real truth, of course, is not just the ANC. The real truth is the people of South Africa, you and I. I watch the scenes in Mali, Bamako at the moment, where the people, the citizens, are rising up against their own government and the president and the courts at that time, right now. And I'm afraid that unless something happens, the patience of the people of South Africa will soon be at an end. And the real worrying thing is that democracy in this country, it seems to me, as currently constituted, just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people. Yeah. We are not getting the democracy dividend that we deserve.
Professor
as the people of South Africa.
And that's where we're going to end it. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Professor Barney Pityana, talking to us there about the passing of Zindzi Mandela and also remembering Ntate Tom Manthata.